Welcome to the Leadership Gambit podcast, where we share life lessons to guide you through your journey to survive and thrive in a volatile business world. And now, your host, Dane Smith, with leadership and management expert, Chris Miller.
All right, Chris, it's good to be back with you.
Good to have you back.
And today I want to talk about the future because, as you and I have discussed before, it seems even more and more uncertain than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Every day we're seeing these rising geopolitical tensions,
Mm-hmm.
the rapid advances in technology, and I'm not going to even bring up AI because it's a whole different variant. And the way that we work, it's constantly evolving. You know, where it happens, where do you work? Office, do you work at home? Where might it be? How does it happen? And even what work looks like as we're all in this sort of flux. And the more and more it comes, the less it seems to be slowing down. So I want to talk about that today and see what kind of things we can discuss with the audience that might be tips, and we'll say maybe 5 tips to talk about to prep them for what's coming.
Actually, there's a great book, Dane, that I highly recommend people read. It's called The Future. It's a few years older now, but it's called The Future's Faster Than You Think by Stephen Kotler and Peter, I hope I don't butcher this, Diamandis.
Diamandis.
It looks at different industries like healthcare, transportation, media, and what they might look like as some of these new technologies come and converge with each other, like what is, when quantum computing blows up kind of thing, and what that's going to do to all these different industries and the impact and ripple effect it's going to have, and then what these industries may look like as a result of those kind of things. And it shows how when those technologies actually, like, just on their own, they're impactful, but when they start compounding with other technologies from other places, those start to have an even faster accelerant effect.
Yeah, I can see that. So, as we've talked about, things aren't going to slow down. So let's talk about, for our listeners, for myself, what are some of the things that I can do to prepare for the future? And these don't have to just be job related. If they're people skills, if they're personal skills, I'm all for it. Let's hear them.
Right. So we'll call these super skills, Dane, because they're like a combination of life skills and professional skills.
5 super skills. Perfect. Yeah, because we know that jobs are going to change. Work's not going to go away though. So there are going to be those fundamental life skills that everyone's going to need. So let's start in on it and start with number 1. What is your first of the top 5 super skills that people can start using right now to prep for near term and for the long term?
Okay. This one shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. Number 1, it's something that I really think should be taught in school, but for some stupid reason it's not. It never was in my day. I still believe it's not, but that's financial intelligence. And I don't mean everybody has to be an accountant, right? I mean that understanding basics like how to do your own budget, building your own budget, very important. Understanding how the economy works at a basic level, very important. Understanding the power of compounding, and we'll talk about that momentarily, super important. But I want to go back to budgeting first, because budgeting is probably the most impactful thing that a lot of people don't do, but you should be. And there's lots of free apps out there. You can take a spreadsheet if you're more inclined to do that, and it's literally just a handful of columns, right? Build your own cash flow of when you get paid, how much you get, how much the net, and then, what is your monthly expenses in totality? What do they come out for each one? And then balance it as best you can. So building a budget, Dane, the first time we ever did it, it actually uncovered for us expenses we didn't even realize that we were just kind of spending every month. Like subscriptions was a big one.
I bet.
It was a money sink. And it was like, wait, why am I still subscribed to this and that and that? I don't use those anymore. I haven't opened that in months. And I was able to save us a couple $100 easily on subscriptions that were no longer needed. Just doing that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about them. Really, really easy to forget about them.
Learn how to budget, number 1. Start small. The other thing is never too early or late to start saving. And even when I was making, barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck in my early 20s, for example, I would still try to put $10 or paycheck to the side if that was the most I could put, because everything else was going to living expenses. That is
Yeah, I think
what
you
I
talked
did.
about that in our episode about looking for a job. I believe that was, I don't remember the name of the episode, but when we were talking about with folks who are found themselves laid off, that was one of the things you said immediately start doing is start putting a little bit of money aside. Actually, you said do it ahead of time and get in that
Yes.
pattern.
Yeah, because if you get in the habit of putting away that little bit of money every paycheck when you have none, as you
Hmm.
work your way up, which upward mobility, but as you work your way up, you continue that habit, but you're able to put a lot more away through that habit. You're not enticed to go blow it all because you have more,
Right.
right? So it's building the habit and the behavior up. That's the important part. Now, the other thing I want to talk about though, Dane, is compounding, because I really don't think people understand how powerful compounding is. I'll start with by asking you a question. Would you rather have $1 million today or a penny doubled every day for 30 days?
So I already know the answer to this one because I've heard this one before. You tell me what's the most common thing you hear? Because I don't want to give it away. What's the one you usually hear from folks?
So when you ask people if they would rather have something now versus later, the majority of people will say now because there's always skepticism about, well, what if I don't get it later? Right?
Hmm.
So most people wouldn't. But the other thing is hearing 1 penny a day doubled for 30 days. I don't think people realize the power or the impact of compounding, right? For the
Right.
full 30 days. At the end of the 30 days, you have $10 million, doubling a penny
Nice.
every day for 30 days. That's the power of compounding. So
I
this is
didn't I didn't realize I didn't realize it was that high. I knew it was up there. I didn't realize it was that high. That's crazy.
yeah, it's 10 million. So
Wow.
here's another way of looking at it, Dane, and I think this one stood out to me. And this was from a book I read called Crash Course 2.0. And we will put links to all these books in the show description. Crash Course 2.0, okay? And it talked about the power of compounding, but it used a little bit more of I guess a little bit more macabre or morbid type of
Okay.
picture. But let's say that you are handcuffed to the top row at a football stadium. I go
All
out into the
right.
field and I put a magical drop of water in the field in the middle of it. And that magical drop of water doubles every minute. How long do you think before the stadium is completely full and you're submersed with water?
I have absolutely no idea. But I like your concept of magical drops of water. Let's hear it.
Okay, so well, think about this. At 45 minutes,
Yeah.
you're looking pretty good. Okay. You're only
Okay.
about 10%, 11% full. But now think about what happens over the next 5 minutes. At 10%, the next minute you're 20. At the next minute you're 40. At the next minute you're 80, and now you're
Hmm.
underwater. So at
Wow.
45 minutes you're okay. At 50 minutes, 52 minutes, you are drowning.
That's crazy.
So that's the power of compounding. And this is one last way or example. Think about humans and our actual total population. It took from the dawn of man until 1960 for us to reach a world population of 3 billion, and only 40 years to add the next 3 billion.
That's terrifying.
That's compounding.
It's not the kind of compounding I like. Let's go back to the money kind. I like that.
So back to the point, financial intelligence, very important. Learn to budget, learn basic economics, and learn the power of compounding and saving.
Okay.
Never too late.
All right. So before we move on to number two,
Mhm.
with related to the financial intelligence, any good books? I think you mentioned one that you read early on. What was that?
Yeah, Crash Course 2.0. So we'll put that one in the description. There's also
Okay.
The Psychology of Wealth. That one I think is even more impactful. That I highly recommend. And it has tips like no one cares about your stuff as much as you do, or you think that they do.
Okay. All right. Good.
Right.
So how about number two? What is number
Okay.
two on the 5 top super skills?
So you and I actually did an episode dedicated to this specific topic, but I have to put critical thinking on the list.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm seeing reports coming out that human intelligence is actually dropping, like we're going backwards. Critical
Mm-hmm.
thinking is lower than it used to be. It's going backwards. And given that we're entering the era of things like deep fakes and, who fake news and everything else that's out there, it becomes more and more important to have that critical thinking to really question what you're seeing, what you're hearing, does it make sense, and to avoid being manipulated and gaslit, which our governments
Mm-hmm.
and our politicians and our companies are more than happy to do to us.
As you know, I've really been getting into prompt engineering and really
Hmm.
understanding how it all works. And I actually have, as I sit here on my computer, I even brought it up. There is an article that I have open in one of my tabs, 13 prompts that will transform your critical thinking. And I'll send it over to you after this, and we can also put a link to
Oh,
it. But
nice.
it's really interesting. Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
interesting one
let's
on
add
how
the
to
link.
use that with AI.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's just anybody who is interested in deep diving more into this whole idea of critical thinking and that, highly recommend go listen to the episode that we did previously on it. But just as a few quick tips, question everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just accept the first thing that you hear. And we tend to have what's called like first or primacy bias, right? Where the first thing we hear tends to stick out, or we weight it more highly than other information that we hear after the first thing. So try to avoid that. Question and stress test your beliefs and your own values once in a while, right? I know that that
Yeah,
isn't always easy to do, but it
that's not
is
comfortable.
good to do. Because think about it, Dana, because I know, some people say, well, I believe what I believe, or, it is what it is. That's just how, well, there are so many things that at some point we all believed and all the quote unquote experts told us were true that turned out not to be true afterwards, right? Or some new
Mm-hmm.
technology or science confirmed, or even came back and said, actually, we were all wrong. And so it's, questioning your own beliefs isn't about being wrong. It's about having new information sometimes and applying that new information to what we believe and then seeing if it still holds true. Right. And I know there's an argument about, well, you're born with it or you're not. No, you are not. It is a way of thinking, and anybody can train their brain to think that way. It's just a mindset.
Might have to go back and listen to that one again. I remember us recording that and getting a lot out of it. I might have to go back and refresh it. All right, Chris. Good, good, good. Before we move on, though, I do want to go ahead and say for the critical thinking, I know that I had mentioned that article that I've got that's using critical
Yes.
thinking prompts within AI.
Yes.
I'll make sure to go ahead and put that link in there as well. And in fact, any of the books that we talk about or articles or anything, we'll go ahead and, as usual, put them in the show notes.
Perfect.
So, what's number three? We've talked about so far. We've talked about financial intelligence. We've talked about critical
Mhm.
thinking. What do you have for me on number three?
So the next one I would say would be focus or deep focus. Okay.
Okay.
So studies have actually shown, and we will link study in the description, as we mentioned, that our attention spans over the last 2 decades have come down substantially. And it actually is reflected in our advertisement. So the average television ad back in 2004 was about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, somewhere in there, right? 2012, 75 seconds. 2023, 47 seconds. And we're also moving into the era now where if you go on things like TikTok or YouTube, you're literally getting like 5 and 10 second ads, right?
Wow.
And this is the thing too. There have been studies done showing that you basically have 1 to 3 seconds to get someone's attention now before they move on.
Well, I think that
So,
kind of is shown by all the clickbait and the rage bait that people will do just to grab somebody's
yes,
attention. It's getting absurd.
exactly. Right. And by doing that, by conditioning yourself to doing that more, it actually ruins your attention span more. It's even more difficult to actually stop on something that is quality because you're not processing it the same.
Well, and I know that our editor and I, Joe, we've had many discussions about if a video hasn't caught our attention in X number of seconds, and I don't know what it is these days because it seems to, as you were saying, get shorter and shorter, that we just kind of
Yep.
move on. It's like next, 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 don't care, don't care. That's why I've stayed away from TikTok because he actually warned me. He said, Dane, you're the type that you'll get so sucked into it that you'll be gone for hours and hours just in that little world and that algorithm. So, yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you on the shorter attention span for
Algorithms made to
sure.
be addictive. It's
That's
programmed
right.
to be addictive.
That's right.
literally. And actually, on that note, I just finished reading that Careless People about the woman who worked for Zuckerberg and Sandberg at Facebook.
Okay.
Highly recommend people read that one. My God, talk about algorithm manipulation and manipulating people. Like, it happens. It's real thing. Definitely go check out that book. So on the focus and deep focus too, Dane, there are studies showing that I will say that any study that you have out there, you're going to also have a study that basically says something else. So you're never going to have 100% expert consensus on anything, right?
Yeah.
So just to kind of show both sides of this, there are studies showing that smartphones, social media, frequent interruptions, and multitasking have actually conditioned us to have a harder time pulling contextual relevance from content,
hmm
and it reduces our ability to focus for longer periods. Okay, so that's one side of it. There are other studies, though, that report that they don't agree that our attention spans have really been reduced, and they're actually saying it's really more selective on the context. So let's say there's something that you yourself are very interested in, like bonsai, right? You could
Uh-huh.
probably sit down and watch videos on it for hours versus something that you're only somewhat or fleetingly interested in that you may only watch for a minute or two, right? So
Gotcha.
context matters is what the other argument is in terms of this one. Now, all of that being said, the real issue, if you really want to drill down into it, is really poor attention management and selective attention. Both of those things are things that you can practice and build, right? So if you really want to focus on something, just a few tips: put distractions like phones and tablets in another room and put them on silent, right? Because anytime you get
Yes.
notifications and dings, it's going to be a distraction. It's a dopamine.
So
Your
distracting.
brain is going to
So
crave the
distracting. Yep.
dopamine. If you can, try to remove any distractions from your immediate area or line of sight and only have the thing you want to focus on in front of you. And we will put a link to the study or the studies that we mentioned in the description.
Absolutely. All right. Is that it for number 3? You ready for number 4?
It is, but I actually think that number 4 is going to kind of build off of this idea of focus or deep focus.
Okay.
And I'm going to say this one, and I know some people are going to disagree with me on this one, but reading. I think reading is going to be a super skill going forward. If you look at literacy rates, they've plummeted. And I can tell you in Canada, for example, I think it was something like half of Canadians have below a high school reading level, and 25% of Americans don't even read at least one book a year.
Now, does that count as if you're doing audiobooks?
Yeah, that account it included audiobooks, digital books, and print books, and they don't even read one a year.
Wow.
I know, right? But if you actually look at the studies over the years, it shows that in general, people have been reading less and less over time. So only about 50% of people say they read 1 to 5 books a year in North America now. But I'm going to be honest, I assume that number tends to be lower on those surveys because I know a lot of people tend to exaggerate when they do those
Yeah.
kind of polls as well, because they don't want to look, they're worried they're going to look dumb or they're going to look bad or whatever if they go too low or they say no.
I know I'm the of my circle, including you. I know that I'm probably the one who reads the least. I listen to audiobooks, but I mean, my wife reads
Right.
constantly. She's in a book club. I know Joe, as I mentioned earlier, our editor reads constantly and is usually sending my wife some book recommendations, and she sends him the same.
Okay.
But I am not.
Good.
I'm bad. I'm not the reader, but I do audiobooks because I do enjoy that.
But so audiobooks, you're doing more than the 1 to 5 a year, I assume.
Very much so. I will say this. There's a challenge though, because as you and I have discussed in the past, you can't multitask. I don't care what anybody
Right.
says. It's just not
Right.
possible. So there's a couple of ways I've done this. So if it's something that I really do have to study, there are times just because I find that reinforcement of having the actual, it sounds ridiculous, but having the book itself in front of me while listening to the audiobook, I find that really helpful. Just gives me a
Okay.
chance to sort of move a little bit faster with the reading and process it. But let's say I have to go outside and rake some leaves, whatever, it's fall, all of those things. And I might get distracted because, I don't know, a squirrel runs by, a neighbor walks by, whatever it may be. I will pause and go back. So there are quite a few times if it's something that I'm really trying to retain, not just a regular, fiction book. It's something that I will certainly pause, go back and listen to it again
Right.
because I don't want to miss it. So there are I think you have to adjust in that kind of situation to make sure you're actually dealing with the distractions that are going to happen if you're trying to multitask.
Right. No, I think those are great tips for making the most out of audiobooks. That was good, Dane. It goes back to the distractions, right? Minimize the
Mhm.
distractions, and when you're in your audiobook, only be in your audiobook or have, a physical copy or a notebook to take your notes or whatever, but only be doing that. Don't be doing other things. I think that those are great
Right.
tips. And I will say this too, because, I mean, you've seen me work and always had a reputation as someone who was a thought leader, who knew their stuff, who was kind of like 2 and 3 steps ahead in terms of planning and roadmap on what to do next. The only reason that I've been able to do that is because I read so much. Honestly, there's no secret to it. I just read a lot. I read a
Mm.
lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of business, as business best practice, emerging thought leadership pieces, things like that. And then I kind of figured out how they could apply to my situation. So there's really no magic formula to it. That's all it is, and anybody can do it.
I think it's an important topic because of the fact that we know with the pandemic, and I've got some nieces and nephew that in middle school and grade school during the pandemic, I know that certainly took a hit on their peers' reading skills. I mean, if you're not in there having to read and you're not getting that constant push to read, it's something that will take an effect. So it'll be interesting to see in 5, 10 years how that affects young adults as they get into the workplace.
Yep, that's fair.
So, yep, we'll definitely link those sources of those studies you had mentioned. Shall we go ahead and talk about number 5? And I will say
Yes.
this. I wanted to add to the list because it's something you and I have spoken so much about in the past, and you really brought it to my
Hmm.
attention over the years, and that's emotional
Yep.
intelligence.
We debated
Yeah.
between this one and agility and adaptability, right?
Right. And my reasoning for pushing so hard with the emotional intelligence is I feel like at the root of everything, no matter what the situation is, I don't care if it's work related, if it's just on a personal level, if you're out in society, having emotional intelligence lets you navigate things in a way that takes out that, I mean, it doesn't take out that emotion. It lets you understand it and understand maybe why somebody is responding a certain way, uh, things like that.
These are skills for navigating a life.
These are skills for navigating life, right? So, Chris, since I know you are so good at talking about and teaching emotional intelligence, I remember that there were, I think it was about 5 key areas, was it, that
Hmm.
as a part? Do you want to go ahead and talk about them?
Yeah, but you know what? We did do a full episode on kind of emotional intelligence 101 in
Yeah,
season 2. So I would highly recommend people go back and listen to that if they wanted more of a deep dive on emotional intelligence. What I don't want to do, Dane, is I don't want to just repeat the
I
same
agree.
stuff that we talked about in that episode. So maybe what we do here is talk about why these things are important and actually put some context around it, right? So for example,
Hmm.
self-awareness being one of the first ones, okay? Being the
Okay.
key one. We talk about this and really self-reflecting, right? We talk about
Hmm.
self-reflecting all the time and then being self-aware as a result and really knowing your strengths. Like the important things here for self-awareness are knowing what you're strong and you're weak at, knowing what motivates you internally and externally, right? Intrinsically and extrinsically, which we've talked about,
Hmm.
but knowing what motivates you. And it's really about understanding yourself well enough to properly manage your physical and mental health. That's what it's all about.
Finding that balance.
Yeah, finding that balance, right? And
Hmm.
then that's kind of like the inward looking piece. Then there's the self regulation, which is the outward looking piece, right? And that's knowing what triggers you when you're dealing with other people, learning not to react to things, or learning to regulate your reaction to things and
Hmm.
keep it internally, right? Or learn to process it in a way internally that you don't react to externally as a result, that kind of thing, right? And feeling your feelings is fine. Reacting to them is within your control, though, and that's the important thing, is learning how to control yourself, right? Learning how to temper your reactions and remain calm during challenges and emergencies. And that's
Right.
another one that's going to help with your mental health. Now, Dane, I want you to talk about empathy because I know that it's one that you talk a lot with your people about, and it's one that's near and dear to your heart, and it's very important to you. So why don't you talk about the empathy side?
Well, without rehashing what we've spoken about in the past, I think the key thing to know about with empathy is think of it as sort of the core to building relationships with others. And this is probably moving forward, in my opinion, going to be one of the most important things when there's going to be less jobs in industries because things are being disrupted, AI, all of that, and because things are being automated.
Uh-huh.
If you can have and really understand empathy and show empathy, that's the difference between a machine and a human in terms of being able to communicate, being able to be supportive for somebody, and most importantly, making yourself available to others. And just by simply making yourself available to others, just like we talk about with one-on-ones, the one-on-one isn't something you need to sit there and talk on and drone on and on and on about. It's for the person you're doing the one-on-one with, so they have a chance to talk to you. So just being there and listening and being empathetic, I think, is one of the things that when I really embraced it and realized that it was a skill, not just something that I had as a part of me, I was able to really connect with people a lot better. And I think that's in this changing world, I think that's something that really does apply to emotional intelligence.
Connecting with people emotionally is what's going to make you memorable, and that's what's going to give you job security. It's what's going to have people say, "Hey, I moved jobs. You should come work for me here
Hmm.
now." Like
Right,
that's having that kind of relationship with people is what's going to drive it.
right.
And it all starts, to your point, with empathy. Totally agree. And actually, on that note, Dane, because that kind of bleeds into social skills at the same time,
Okay.
right? And that's another key component of emotional intelligence. Our network or your network is one of the most valuable things that you have, and it's going to continue to be super valuable, especially in some of the uncertainty that we've been talking about. It's your network that's going to be one of the key things of value in your life, right? It's how you're going
Yes.
to find work or opportunities, or somebody to help with your anxiety, like all of those different things. And there's studies showing that quality of life and longevity are directly related to the quality of your relationships as well. So it's really important to have your social skills and make sure that you're good at connecting with people. Don't isolate yourself. The worst thing you can do is isolate yourself for your mental and your physical health. And actually, there's a couple of good books on that thing, Emotional Intelligence 2.0 and Good Anxiety, which talks about how to take the neurotransmitters that are released during anxiety and use them for productive means within your body.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely put a link then to all the things we've talked about today. We are coming up on our time. Once again, Chris, I want to first and foremost say it's good to be back, and
Yes, good to have you back.
we look. Well, thank you, and we look to hearing from everyone, and we'd like to know what some of your suggestions are on some of the super skills you all have found very, very useful, and that you think are going to be very useful moving forward in this crazy roller coaster of a world that we're in these days.
Yep.
All right, everyone.
Well,
Thank you
thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Don't forget to
Yep,
like, subscribe, share with people in your network. Help get us out there. Help spread the message.
that's right. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
This has been the Leadership Gambit podcast with your host, Dane Smith, and leadership and management expert, Chris Miller. If you like our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment or review, make a donation, and most importantly, share us with others in your network. Visit us at www.theleadershipmovement.net for more content and helpful business resources.